All right, and while you're clapping, please continue clapping as I bring up Nick Smith, who's with Manifesto, where he's the marketing director, and we're pleased to hear his thoughts from the executive point of view. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Hello, everybody. I've been asked to be a little less animated so that I can get filmed over here, which I will find as a struggle, but I'll do my best. It's not the what, it's the how of the how. I was working in retail banking about probably 20 years ago now, maybe it was 15, and I had a fantastic boss that was a deeply philosophical thinker about the world of marketing. And he said, it's not the what, it's the how of the how. And at the time, nope, I didn't get it either. So hopefully during the course of this presentation, I'll explain what the hell that is. So to set the context, there are three things, because there are always three things that I need to say up front. The first is that during the course of the day, I felt that I was in the wrong room. I am what you might call a dinosaur. I've been pitched as the executive perspective, and frankly, I'm more than grey hair, I'm no hair, and I probably only understood about a third of the things that were being said during the course. I got the words, but the sentences were pretty challenging. And as Connor, my former colleague at Accenture, would say, you know, all I'm going to do is trot out the old stories of what it was like being a leader in a large corporate. And I think that's one of the fundamental differences for me, from my perspective of the world, and for the world that you now occupy. So the first thing is that I need to try and explain the experiences and philosophies that I have developed over the years, and see if we can relate it to the things that you do and that you're good at, which effectively is my second point. The geeks shall inherit the earth. We've always known that, but you do speak a language, and you do things that those people who sit in boardrooms find difficult to understand. So we need to find a way of connecting what you do to businesses in the broadest sense, not just in how you optimize the performance of campaigns or activity, particularly or especially digital activity, but how you sit within the context of how an enterprise does its marketing. And I guess that is my third point. This may end up sounding a little like a treatise or polemic, but what I think that we must understand is the way that marketing's changed, and the things that you do still need to be sat in the context of what makes a difference, what is innovative in big business, how we can make innovation become something that is more than just iterative, but also has the world of creativity, big ideas behind it, which is where I began. In the beginning, you will have heard something about this. There was the world of advertising, and it's where I began my career. And it was very simple. We developed products, we packaged them, we got them distributed, and we did advertising. We told customers about what we did. It was a really, really simple world. It was fun. From the world of advertising, I moved into the world of being a client in consumer goods, then in retail banking, and then at British Gas, which is where most of my stories, as Connor would attend, will come from. And along the way, I saw many things that actually are much truer to your world, the things that you'd recognise. It's a world where things have fundamentally changed, of course, not just the consumer, but also the channels that we now have to communicate through, and the consumers communicate back to us over. Now, you guys have got to navigate a much more complex world than the world that I first experienced. So how do we do that? How do we find a way where you can be valued in your organisation way beyond the things that you do on a daily basis? You've had to develop, as marketers, we've had to develop the ability to wear a whole pile of hats. You know, we're project managers, we're statisticians, we need to understand technology, we need to be able to do Excel, we need to do the very functional things that make a marketing person successful within an organisation, to be judged as creating and adding value. The issue with this is that we have so much less time now to invest in what the consumer really thinks and feels, to be innovative in the manner in which we apply insight and use that insight to create compelling propositions and deliver to the consumer in a language that they would understand and recognize. We also have lost a little bit, I think, that connection to how an enterprise drives growth, how an enterprise pulls the levers, recognizes and also pulls the levers for growth. We need to, in the way that you are doing in your disciplines, in your specialisms, explore those levers and work out how we can exploit them. I was wondering how I was going to use this slide. Magic and logic. I think the issue is that still the fundamental principles of marketing that existed when I was a kid, short trousers, are just the same as they are now. We need to apply both those logical base principles, the foundations of what makes a decent piece of work that is judged successfully by your organisation, have impact on the consumer, change the way that the consumer would think about your business and your proposition. It's not just about maths. I mean, maths is highly compelling. It's about creativity. So for me, true innovation is not just about taking the Lego blocks that sit around you and constructing something that delivers a new world. It's also in the truest, broadest creative sense of the word. We need to connect to consumers in a way that is compelling, is differentiated and surprising. We've heard today about how experience is something that is, if you like, the new differentiator. We need to find a way of delivering surprise as well as our algorithmically driven successful outcomes. And every day it gets worse. So I've heard some new phrases today. The viral loop. It's a new one on me. We're obviously familiar with omni-channel. That's another new one over the last few years. And behavioural retargeting. What about cohort ROI? First time I heard that today. Brilliant. Can you imagine the guys in the boardroom wondering what the hell you're talking about? You know, it's not a language that they get easily. They want to be spoken to in their language. I think at Alliance and Leicester we called it the inverse law of seniority. The more senior you are, the more you forget the things that got you there in the first place. It's just about the way it is. These guys have a different perspective and optic on the world, and I guess that the last presentation was particularly humbling for me in that you realise that all businesses that are new businesses are inherently young and digital businesses are inherently young. The challenge is changing old businesses, making old businesses realise that digital is not something that sits on the side as another channel, but is something that is central to their model of delivery. You guys have that power, and I think the most exciting thing for me is seeing what you might do as you become more and more senior in your organisations to change the way the businesses think and do. So let's start with the beginning. I know many of you will recognise this piece of advertising, and I guess my point is that in this era, marketers were sitting at the top table. They were not just having conversations around strategy and positioning, they were then executing in a way that changed the shape and trajectory of businesses. And it was very much idea-driven. It was, sure, you need to build that product that met the need, you needed to package it beautifully, you needed to price it competitively. Those are all truisms. And then you needed to make sure that your consumer could access those products. But you know, with great advertising and with great execution, you can change the way that businesses are seen. And you know, I mean, these were good old days. I mean, the champagne was on a daily occurrence, I can assure you. And they even gave BAFTAs for advertising, and yes, I have one. It was a wonderful, wonderful world, but you know what? It was a world that needed to evolve or die, and I think that then what took place, if you like, were the dark ages. And many of us were going through our formative years and discovering the power of data, and actually the marketer, during the course of this period, lost their place at the top table. 4 R's. We will always know that, I suspect, as right customer, right offer, right channel, right time. CRM was something that was invented, in inverted commas, in 90s, I guess, and it was driven by the desire to create value from customer relationships. to harness the technologies that were available and get involved in working through where the value was within your business. We learned about predictive modeling. We learned about the truism that 80% of your customers were likely to be creating very little value, or certainly some of them were destroying it, and only 20% were really creating value for you. And the exciting thing for me at that time was just how simple it all felt. There were only 4 possible commercial outcomes. You acquire a customer, you cross-sell or upsell to the customer, you create margin from the relationship you have with that customer by changing the processes, or you retain them. You judged everything by the value of your actions. It was brilliant. It was what you might call the early days of performance marketing. We were, the data was there. The proof was in the pudding. I didn't care how much money I spent, as long as I knew where the return was and the comparative return against one piece of activity versus the other. And there were only 3 levers that you could pull. And this was the exciting thing for a bloke that had started in advertising. Comms is the thing that most people still think marketers do. Now we do the colouring in. We place stuff that people look at and go, actually, we are, and we should be at the hub of a business. We are the people that have the opportunity not just to deliver comms, but to identify and create offers, and I mean offers again in the broadest sense of the word, and then re-engineer processes. So this is the time when customer experience became something that businesses started going, well, we need to build something that is actually about our orientation as a business towards the customer. Customer centricity was a word that first got used, and I think that it's been much maligned, quite rightly. So many businesses say, we are going to put the customer at the heart of everything we do, and then don't. Retail banks lost their way. I think the point was that this all felt complex. The heavy lifting involved, the amount of money it cost. I moved from retail banking to British Gas, and we employed a large system integrator to give us SAP Siebel. There were a number of £100 million spent on that system. It took about 4 years to deploy, and we never really knew whether the benefit was realised. It was a tough old gig trying to persuade people within our organisation that marketing added value to that equation. So we all know that the world's changed fundamentally. We have new channels to deal with, the channels that you work in, and businesses do know that they need to consistently deliver to their customers across those channels. Again, they're not stupid, they know that they must do this. We also know the difference between tell or push advertising and dialogue-based advertising. We also recognise that our consumer is no longer in the audience and the brands are on the stage. We're all in the mosh pit together, trying to have conversations that re-establish the trust of brands with the consumer, and that's led to a complete change in the way that organisations think about reputation management. Social is what we all know it to be, and I think the only way we at Accenture, while I was there, persuaded organisations to take social seriously was to think about the damage to their organisation in terms of reputation. New competitors have emerged. We've witnessed some today. The arrival of new businesses and new ideas and the source of innovation that digital has created for businesses is palpable, and it's obvious to us all. The old businesses haven't yet worked out what to do. They are still doing the same things. They still have the same operating models. They still have the same organisational structures. They still think of technology as 6-week release cycles, and they sure as hell don't really understand dynamic analytics. And I'm obviously painting a bleak picture, and it's not true of all. They also aren't thinking hard enough about new approaches to pricing. So dynamic pricing models that recognise different points at which the consumer can access brands. 2 brief examples. I remember some work we did at Sky, and they asked us to look at their web estate. And at the time, the leadership weren't able to agree amongst themselves what sandwiches to order for lunch. So it was quite a challenge getting them to reassess the objectives for the web estate. At the time, it was about monetising eyeballs, which was a surprise to us even then, given actually most of the people within the business was behaving like the web estate was all about selling boxes. The reality was, as part of a multi-channel customer experience, with a reorganization and re-architecturing of their web estate, they could change the dynamics of their business from a commercial perspective as well as a customer experience perspective very easily. So a change of thinking in an old business, and you may not think of Sky as an old business, required that what are we here for, what is this here for start point. Another example, News International. If you work in a business where every day you're looking at circulation numbers that are in decline, it's not very motivating. You don't jump up out of bed every morning, as Craig said, and enjoy going to work. You needed to reframe the metrics and work out a new model that could actually charge for content. And they have been highly successful in taking editorial content behind the paywall, but it wasn't just about charging for content. It was creating a new proposition, a new operating model for that business that identified how editorial was a lever, content was a lever for delivering a new proposition. So the point is only that old businesses recognize that they need to evolve or die, and we as marketers are in prime position to help them get to that place. But we need to think beyond the disciplines that we're currently engaged in and look actually broadly, more broadly at the enterprise. So it's what we call marketing with a big M. It's a brilliant thing. Smart businesses are recognizing what they need to do, and I guess, again, to demonstrate what an old lag I am, the first time I came across this was in retail banking, where my enlightened boss talked about the paradox of delivery. If you are a marketer, you think you own the customer, in inverted commas, you think you own the brand. You think that actually your role is to help the business understand how important you are. The reality is that in marketing with a big M, you've got to give it up. Like letting a teenager go, you've got to identify that the call centers are as responsible for customer experience as you are. You've got to identify that finance have a part to play in helping you count value. And you've got to recognize that you have to be partners with technology, because technology, of course, supports the ecosystem that then delivers to the customer. So marketing with a big M has, in my view, five principles. So I'm going to leave you with these 5 principles. We're all communicators. We need to explain to our businesses what the customer proposition is. We need to help them understand their role in delivering it. And my boss at British Gas used to ask me, at the beginning of every budget period, every strat planning session, he said, what are the 5 big things that we're going to get from you next year? And Dave Brailsford-like, because I'd become a CRMer, I wanted to give him 100 things. The reality is that although the 100 things are important, businesses need 5 big things. They need to be absolutely clear of the principles of what they are going to do to deliver for their customers. Not by you, just you, but for the enterprise. And you have to do that with simplicity. You have to explain with simplicity, so not just your business understands, but then the consumer understands. And you're the glue. You are the glue as the marketer that help see the way for the organization to navigate through that. The most exciting thing I think about this is that not since the era of Avis has marketing re-emerged as being so important. We lost our way. Now marketers are returning to the boardroom and marketers are becoming CEOs again. So your futures are going to be much brighter than old lags like me that only ever got to be a senior CMO and never got to be a CEO. And so I started my own company. That was the only way I could do it. Start your own business. Again, I know that you know this. It's obvious. Choice, though, is our enemy as well as our opportunity. You have to behave in a way, your businesses need to behave in a way, as we just saw, that your customers notice. They have to want and recognize your product. You need to be critical of what you do. You need to walk in your customer's shoes. Occasionally, it's very painful. But we have to remember that the child in us needs to be surprised and delighted. It's not just about funky advertising, it's about the experience and the way an organization behaves. Because if nobody notices your efforts, frankly, what's the point? make friends. I think I first said, or heard actually, it was a lady called Claire Salmon who is now at Royal London. She was probably at ITV at the time. Make friends with finance, she said. Finance need to recognise the value. You need to be able to speak their language, and I think that we are so well placed, and you guys in the room are so well placed, to change the nature of your conversation with your business because you are driven towards outcome. Outcomes that drive a better growth trajectory for your organisation. And it's fair to say, perhaps until now, I've certainly never experienced a finance director walking into my office and saying, here you go, here's some more money. You are now in a position, you could argue, where particularly if you look beyond just digital channels, that you can argue the business needs to invest more money in the consumer. But also, you need to, I was going to say snog with technology, that's probably not right. Snuggle with technology. It was once upon a time that technology kept the lights on within a business, and actually it's not that long ago. And the language of technology was so different from the language of customer and marketing. Now, they are the source of innovation, and they are the source of a much more dynamic environment that we need to embrace as marketers, and I'm sure many of you do. This is something that you'll be familiar with. Perhaps less so, though, getting into bed with HR. Don't touch. End up in trouble. HR are very often responsible for the employee brand. And the employee brand is the thing that, even in digitally led businesses, is the thing that will make a difference to your customer experience. You need to get HR on your side and understanding what the external brand looks like, and you need to be party to the conversations about their role in delivering it. So make friends. You don't need to be convinced by this one, I'm sure. I guess the point I would make is that ideas command a premium. It's not just about the lowest cost. And if you have confidence in your ideas, then you are peddling something much more than a commodity that is just about the data. So we used to have a phrase at British Gas which was, don't do it if you can't measure it, which actually was a liberating source of innovation. It meant that the crazy ideas actually got a voice, and most people worked out how they could make a difference commercially to the performance of the business. So demand more of yourselves, deliver more of yourselves, and let the data decide. I guess this is my opportunity for a shameless plug for Kenshi. Only work with the best. No individual, no agency, or no company has all the answers. It's absolutely true. And as a marketer, you are the orchestrator of the tools that you have at your disposal. It's a team sport. We say it a lot nowadays. It's a team sport in that change is so prevalent that you need to find partners who you can trust and who will evolve with you, who will learn from the things they've done and help you make a difference. And it's not just partners who have the values that you espouse, it's the ones that also share the same orientation towards value. You need to fight with them about making sure that the outcomes are the agreed outcomes. When you sit in the boardroom as a senior marketer and you are asked why the hell you've just employed somebody, you usually need a very straightforward explanation. And those conversations are difficult if you haven't had those debates with your partners first. So my treatise is, the world of marketing has fundamentally changed, but it's still fundamentally the same. I recall doing a presentation to the Centrica board, and it was about a 45-minute exposition of just how brilliant we were at using customer data to create value. We had worked with and across the business to create a data-driven, multi-channel, multi-product, customer-centric approach to creating value that we could count. And after this brilliant presentation, 45 minutes. I was fab. The chairman said, "So what advertising are you doing next month?" The point is that we are both in charge of what is above the waterline and what is below. We don't get permission to do either unless we do both well. And that means being very creative about the proposition, very creative about how we communicate, and applying deep customer insight. It also means being on top of performance optimization and timeliness and effective delivery and an efficient application of budgets. That's what gives you permission in the boardroom to do the things that are sometimes a bit crazy. Otherwise, they just won't trust you. Failing that, I just need to do this. If we haven't got it, it's not the what, it's the how of the how. If you got it, you understand what I'm saying, I hope. Basically, we all have more or less the same ingredients. We usually get the same instructions with those ingredients, but the differences between what it should look like and what it does look like is often dramatically affected by the how of the how. So what's the difference between Apple and Nokia? Between John Lewis and J.C. Penney? Netflix or Blockbuster? Nike or Puma? I think it's attitude. And marketers are renowned for the attitude that they can apply, which is not the what, it's not the how, it's the how of the how. And if you're not any good at that, then you can always strut. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Any questions for Nick? All right, I have one quick one, and then, do you mind?
No, not at all.
All right, and then I'll bring up Rob to close us out. So lots of great insights in terms of how marketing has changed and how in many ways it stayed the same. Thinking through how you leverage technology, data, keep things simple, and at the core it's about attitude. Wondering on the consumer side, the people that we're all marketing to, what do you think is the biggest change in that behavior? And what have you sensed? Or is it still a case of the same things matter to them, and therefore the classical laws of marketing apply?
So I think fundamentally there is an emotional need in consumers to connect and value the products that they pay for. And they'll pay a premium for a brand that delivers an emotional attachment for them. So in that sense, it's not changed. I think the difference is the manner in which consumers have a say in brands and have a say in businesses. So it's not just about whether they are talking about those businesses and brands with each other. It's actually that they are a source of innovation for those brands. And in the old days, we do big research projects that would take weeks, and now you can discover how people feel about your business in minutes. So I think my point, I guess, is that the tools are now more readily available to us, and we can use data and use technology far more intelligently to deliver stuff to the consumer, and the consumer plays a part. They're so much more literate in what we are doing to them. So they recognise the value exchange of us giving them products and offers and them giving us data. They recognise that choice is abundant, but they still want to do the old-fashioned thing, which is connect emotionally to brands.